Well, hello there. Welcome to the Writing and Resilience podcast. I'm Lisa Cooper Ellison, your transformational and trauma informed writing coach and resident story alchemist. Right now, I am either resting, having fun, or preparing for the next season of the podcast, which will air on January 22nd, 2026. Until then, I've curated a short winter break double take season of episodes that deserve a second listen because I know that hearing them again will lead to new insights for you. And if you're new to the podcast, they're a great place to start. If you want another way to deepen your learning and prepare for a very successful 2026, you can do so by taking my free Ditch Your Inner Critic Masterclass using the link in the show notes. I wish you the happiest of holidays, and let's go ahead and dive into this episode. Welcome to Writing and Resilience, the podcast for writers who want to write and live the story that sets them free. I'm your host, Lisa Cooper Ellison, a writer, transformational and trauma-informed coach, story alchemist, and fellow traveler on the winding road of healing and creativity. Each week, I'll share tools, practices, and conversations that will help you let go of what no longer serves you as you create stories that change lives, especially your own. Together, we'll explore how to trust your creative voice, support your mental health and resilience, work with your nervous system and unique design, and stay connected to your deepest calling as a writer, even when life gets messy. It's time, my friends, to write and live the story that sets you free. I'm honored to walk that journey alongside you, one story and one episode at a time. Are you looking for some fresh ways to see your memoir or revise it? And have you ever wondered what life is like after your book is published? This week, I am thrilled to introduce you to a powerful voice and memoir, Hannah Sward, author of Strip. In today's conversation, Hannah takes us behind the scenes of her writing process, how she wrote her first draft by hand as one long, unfiltered sentence, how she found the courage to put her full truth on the page, and how she distilled years of experience into a memoir that moves with incredible precision and power. You'll also learn transcription tricks, sex scene writing tips, the unexpected doors publishing your book can open, and some somatic techniques for navigating vulnerability. Grab your pen, open your heart, and get ready to learn on this week's episode of the Writing and Resilience podcast. Hey friends, it's Lisa Cooper Ellison, your resident story alchemist and host of the Writing and Resilience podcast. I am so excited to invite you to my brand new class, Revise Your Memoir. This is a 6-part online series I created with my friend, publishing expert Jane Friedman. If you finished a draft of your memoir and you're wondering how to shape it into the story you truly want to tell, this is the class for you. Together, we'll dig into structure, pacing, and finding your story's emotional truth. This is the kind of revision that transforms manuscripts from rough to ready. Each class comes with a detailed workbook, recordings, and real-time guidance to help you make real progress. Plus, those of you who sign up for the entire program will have opportunities to submit pieces that could be live workshopped during one of the webinars. And here's the best part. If you sign up for the entire program, you'll get a bonus session with Jane Friedman where we'll talk about getting your book ready for agents and publishers. I'll also be hosting co-writing sessions just for participants so you can build accountability, practice what you've learned, and ask questions about your project in a supportive space. If you're ready to revise your memoir in 2026, go to janefriedman.com/revise your memoir series with Lisa Cooper Ellison, or click on the link in the show notes. I look forward to seeing you in 2026. Well, Hannah, welcome to the podcast. I am so glad that you're here today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's such an honor to be invited on.
Well, I've really been excited about this episode because I absolutely love your book, Strip. So I'm going to hold it up so people can see the cover if they're watching on YouTube. It is a gripping and intense and powerful read. And we're going to dive into some of the details of that through our conversation. However, I always like to give the author the first word. So what would you like us to know about you and your book?
Thank you for the praise, especially coming from you. I really feel like it's a story about a young woman, a journey about abandoning oneself and coming back to oneself. And I don't even know about actually coming back because I don't know if I was ever with myself, but the abandoning and then coming home. The title can be just a little deceiving, right? Because it sounds salacious, but it really is about that inner journey.
I was listening to another recording and I love the double entendre you talked about. So,
Mm-hmm.
yes, we could think about the salacious piece because that is a piece of the topic that you're talking about. And it really is that stripping away
Yeah.
of, I'm going to say, based on my reading, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, the
Yeah.
varnish of shame that we put on ourselves that keeps us from really connecting deeply to who we truly are.
Yes. I love the way you articulated that. That's exactly it. And I never thought that uncovering was possible for me.
And I think that really shows up on the page. You know, to me, some of the things that really struck me was how you were able to compress this huge story into something so compact and
Yeah.
tightly written. I think that for me, at least, the brevity of it, especially your chapters, which are very short, intensified that power without overwhelming me.
Yeah. For the listeners, the chapters really are short. I mean, like that's one whole chapter.
Yeah, 1.5 pages.
Yes, that was really hard. That was very hard. I love brevity. However, the first draft, I will say, was not written that way. And that wasn't my initial vision. The first draft was written all handwritten in a journal, 99 cents journal like this. Well, a number of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one continuous sentence.
Mm.
And I had no idea what shape it was going to take. However, I had been a short story writer before, so I loved the idea of a contained piece. And also, being the daughter of a poet, I think something about the shorter form. Of course, poetry can be long, but I tend to gravitate to the shortest poems. I love that. And I think that what you're saying, that the brevity lends itself to the story without overwhelming, something about flipping it along was really important to me because I didn't want to dwell in the trauma.
Yeah.
I wanted it to be put out there, but moved along.
Mm-hmm.
And because it would be a lot, it was also my experience of it. I did, right? Like living it. I didn't sit with it. The first draft was one big long mess. Actually, the first 10 drafts. This is important that I didn't start wanting to tell the whole story. Not just wanting to, I didn't think I was going to. I started in adulthood. So the childhood became later because that is a very long span from 75 to 2008 in a memoir.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was very impressed by. And of course, this book has won an IPPY. It has also
Mhm.
been reviewed in the Los Angeles Times. So, I'm not the only one saying these things. But yeah, it is really hard to pull off a book where the time span is so long. And I do think that the brevity of your chapters helped with that. And I love that you shared some of your process. The fact that it was a single sentence is just wild and yet feels so true. And yet I was listening to another interview with you, and one of the things you said is that it wasn't something that you wrote at one time, that there was a certain way that you had to write it because of the intensity of the material. So what did you do to help yourself write this book? And also, what was your process in continuing that sentence?
Well, it was a really long journey for me because I didn't start writing it until I was 2 years sober. And I was so disengaged or disassociated, which I didn't even know
Mm-hmm.
what that word meant. I mean, I knew what it meant intellectually, but I didn't know what it meant. And I dedicate the book to sitting in the hours.
Yeah.
And that had always been my dream, that I could be a woman sitting on the couch alone with myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because I also knew that was the only way to access connecting with another person. That if
Yes.
I'm not sitting here, I can't connect with you. And therefore, I can't connect with the page. The book is dedicated to that. And it took about 5 years to write that book and then another 5 years to publish. I could not have written it any sooner. because I was in therapy, I was in recovery during it.
Mm-hmm.
And through the process of outside help, so to speak, and then the process of learning to settle in and sit with myself and put pen to paper, it began and it was quite excruciating. Sometimes I would just pick up the pen and write, and I wouldn't even sit down. I would stand up because my
Mm-hmm.
goal was write 2 pages a day, handwritten, no matter what. That was my intention. Like, really, Lisa, I didn't care even what I was writing as long as I was writing. So I had all these pages. I can't even tell you. I mean, so many pages, and so much was cut. But going back in and the process of transcribing it was in itself part of it in terms of starting to see it. You know, it's interesting writing memoir because it's like, how could you not know the story? It's your story,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, write the outline and write the story. I didn't know what my own story was. So it's like, not only don't I know, but then what do I want to share? And the biggest question was what serves the story
Mm-hmm.
and what doesn't. So much was taken out. As a concrete example, there's 2 siblings in the book. In reality, there's 7 of us, all half. And I had written about a number of them, and it did not serve the story. And it
Mm-hmm.
just got too out here. And because we lived in so many places and there was so much chaos that it was like, how do I narrow it down? And again, how does what I'm including serve the story?
Yes.
And I think the single hardest part was the linking of the story
Mm-hmm.
because I was so disconnected in myself that how do I link? That was the hardest part, the transitions. And it really was simultaneous to my own healing.
I love that answer. And, some of the things that I'm hearing in this, and there's one thing that I do want to come back to, and that's the transcription process, is that you had to allow yourself to go wherever the story took you while you were also healing at the same time. So the healing helped you connect to yourself, which helped you connect to the page.
Yeah.
And then you had this transcription process that you used. And as you did that work and you got a sense of what your story was, you were able to see what really served it. So you did a mixture of this kind of macro analysis, this stepping back and saying, like, okay, what is my story?
Yeah.
What question am I trying to answer? What actually belongs? And you found that not only was it just specific scenes, but actual people in your life weren't serving the story. And I think that's really important for a lot of listeners to hear. If you're writing a book, yes, certain people might be super important to you, and their appearance in your book may not be doing the work that you hope it is. And so you have to be both compassionate and ruthless at the same time.
Yes, that's right. And to condense the years, as one
Mm-hmm.
solid example, there's one chapter, I think it's 6 pages, about a relationship with a man. And in reality, that lasted 4 or 5 years. In the
Mm-hmm.
book, it clips along because that would have been another whole book.
Right. And actually, when I think about this book, there's this attachment angle, right? There's this lack of attachment to self, there's a lack of attachment to other people. And the fact that that moved so quickly, to me, it made it seem like maybe this relationship was not as important, as probably the wrong word. I could tell that there was care, but that it was easier to detach from it. Like, it wasn't as deep or profound as it needed to be. And the fact that it sped by helped me see that as a reader.
Oh, I love that. I'd like love to say that that was a conscious decision. It would make me sound so smart, but it really wasn't. It's interesting to talk about the book in retrospect, right? Yeah, and you were saying about the transcription process. I really loved that because first off, the writing pen to paper helped me not censor myself.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I needed to get the draft out. I didn't even actually know I was writing a book at that point. So I think, that helped and it also didn't help because it made it so overwhelming. I had a mentor and she's like, this is a book. This is a memoir. I'm like, oh, well, it's just not. That's not what I want to do. I'm a short story writer. I don't just really, my goal was write again.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking to what you said about letting it take me where it needed to take,
Mm-hmm.
that was it. Especially, I think, in our culture, it was really difficult to give myself that time.
Yes.
And other authors, other writers, they were much younger than me, publishing books to much, acclaim. And it just seemed to be moving really fast. And here I am, and I'm like in my late 40s at this point, and I just felt like I need to move this along. And yet I also knew I need to honor this process.
Yes. And I'm so glad you just said that because we live in a very capitalistic society that's all about
Yeah.
production, it's about doing. And when you have created a product that you can hold in your hand, I mean, of course, that's very satisfying. I'm not going to say it's
Yeah.
not. It feeds the ego. And yet, there's so much more to what writing can do for us. And
Right.
if we focus so much on that end goal, we miss the power of this process. I think that it can lead to work that could be technically outstanding and yet subpar in terms of the insight. And
Right.
that's not always true, but I do think that that can happen, especially in memoir.
Yeah, it's, certainly something I still struggle with to this day. What's productive enough? What do I value? And in my core, I know what I value. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
looking at you and going, how many books did you publish? Like it's not, it has
Right.
nothing to do with that. And yet I have this like, oh, that person published 12 books. But it's kind of like, well, okay.
Well, I think social media
Yes.
especially gets us to think in those ways. That comparison can be so profound. And then also just the competitiveness of our field. In other jobs, you can work really hard. And if you do, you're more than likely going to move up the ladder, whatever that ladder is. And yet,
Yeah.
when it comes to creativity, there's the perception of a ladder, in terms of publishing and publishing in certain ways. And is this the big five or is this another way?
Yes.
There's that perceived ladder. And yet you can work as hard as you possibly can and create something that is absolutely brilliant. And who knows what's going to happen with that ladder? And especially
Yeah.
now that things are
Yeah.
changing so much. So, really being able to focus on yourself, on that sense of being, developing your voice, which I know is a big part of this process for you, is really important. And I'm going to say a couple of things, and I have some questions that are not on the questions that I sent to you. So I love this
Okay.
because then we get to have this like free flowing conversation, which I know is going to be really helpful to people. So I talk about this a lot with people, how the first draft is an opportunity to bear witness to your own experience. For many people, especially when trauma is involved, it is your first, or maybe not the first, but for many people, actually is an opportunity to see yourself and to see what happened. And then it's through this revision process that we begin to take our power back. The first draft can feel very disconcerting, destabilizing, very powerless. And then we go through this process of taking our power back because we shape the story. And
Right.
you did a marvelous job of shaping the story and framing it around a specific traumatic event that
Hmm.
echoes and reverberates throughout your book. But if we think about your process in a granular way, I want to dive into this transcription process. I'm going to tell you what I do,
Yeah.
and I'm curious to know what you do because I think it's helpful for people to hear this. So when I'm writing, like you,
Yeah.
longhand is my way
Oh,
because
is it?
oh my gosh, I have to write longhand. My best work comes from longhand because there is an emotional connection to the words that is very different than when I'm typing. Also, I think differently. I can be messier. I
Yes.
can put everything on the margins and it can go all over the place.
Messy is the word.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, I love a good mess.
And I still think about your essay in Huffington Post, I think it
Oh,
was,
yes.
about making the mistake. If you haven't read it, to
Mm-hmm.
the listeners, that's what clued me into you. When I read that, I was like, oh, who is this person? I am so there. I've made that mistake and I've ended up in a parking
Yes.
lot sobbing.
Yeah, emotional flashbacks are no joke and they impact so many people. And that's why I wrote that piece, which I wrote longhand. And
When you're saying that, that's what I felt. I could feel it when I read it.
yes, well, thank you. I think it's so important for all of us to step away from the computer because,
Yeah.
I mean, yes, I can type much faster. But
Yeah.
there is something powerful in that. And then I do transcribe, and it depends on the length of something. Sometimes I will just type something into the computer, but I've also found that sometimes I will actually use Microsoft Word dictation
Oh,
and
I've
I
never
will
done
read
that.
it. Yeah. I broke my finger a little while ago and I was forced to learn these things. What I love about it is twofold. It does take a little bit of work. So, for instance, if I'm reading, I have to say my sentence and then period. And then I say the next sentence. And when I get to the end of the paragraph, you have to say next line. It can be a little clunky, but it's faster than my typing. I mean, it can be super
Mhm.
fast. Also, I have an opportunity to hear the words out loud and I can feel in my body when it's working
Oh,
and when it's like, we'll see what happens with that. It doesn't mean I'm going to scrap anything, but I think in a first draft, one of the things that happens as we revise is that we say things in our first drafts that are the truth. And
mhm.
then our critical editors come in and say, no, that's not right, or that's, fix that.
Yes.
But sometimes what it's telling us to fix is our vulnerability.
Yes. I love, first of all, that that is how you do it with the pen to paper, what that informs of the rawness and what it captures. And you just don't know what's going to come.
Right.
I was doing it this morning, not just to write, but because I just do my journal. Sometimes it's about like what the day was yesterday,
Yeah.
which I thought was today. I'm like, I'm bored. I don't write the day. And I started writing about office chairs. Now, if I had been at the computer, I'm not sure it would have been about office chairs, right? Like, and it just came because it was like, I don't know, something about the pen. And then what you're saying about the transcription process, I find that there's more surprises when I'm pen to paper.
Yes.
And what you're saying about the vulnerability speaks to, when you were talking about the process of writing the book and how I was able to do that. Certain scenes I wasn't able to do. And I did them as a concrete example, because I always love it when people give concrete examples. I had sent, I don't know how many drafts, whatever, draft to my agent at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He hadn't become my agent yet, but I sent it to him, and he said, this draft is almost there. The reader's going to want to know more then. And then we had sex.
Mm-hmm.
He said, you do that often. And he was right. And I'm like, well, we did. And I'm leaving the room now. Right. Like I don't want to go there. And it really took what it took with therapy, with my
Mm-hmm.
journey, with 5 years into it towards the end, that I went back in those scenes to be with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had concrete exercises that my therapist did to capture that and that vulnerability. And even then, I held back a little. And I remember my mentor, I remember bringing her my pages. Jill, she's here. She passed away. She passed away at 80 something earlier this year, but she was my mentor. And even in her 80s, bringing her these pages, these raw sex pages, she's like, something's missing. It was a pretty vulnerable scene. And I'm like, how do you know? I was
Mm.
not being completely honest, not completely vulnerable.
Well, I'm curious when you think about a sex scene in particular, they're very hard to write for a variety of different reasons. And some of it is about how we feel about sex and how our
Mhm.
histories impact that, but also just the technicality of writing
Yes.
something that doesn't read as very mechanical. When you think about your vulnerability and those sex scenes, in particular the adult sex scenes, when you say that it wasn't vulnerable enough, what do you mean?
I wasn't giving specifics. I was holding back.
Ah, so holding back the specifics.
Yes, I've said this before in podcasts, but this example is always the one that I think of is I brought my pages to my mentor, and it was about a hotel room in Los Angeles, the peninsula. I still remember it. And there was a scene in that hotel room, and it was a disturbing evening.
Mm.
And as it was, I felt like it was still disturbing with omitting something. I held it back because I was ashamed. I had such deep shame about it. And so it was the specifics. It was two or three sentences. It wasn't even about the writing, but it was about what am I not saying?
Yeah.
And that's the power of an incredible editor that she knew.
What was it like to finally get those three sentences down?
When I was going back in to flesh it out, I was at the point in therapy where I was able to sit with myself. I was given an exercise of making sure I was in the room. So concrete exercise about looking, naming things, putting my feet on the floor, flat on the floor, hands to thighs and rubbing them, getting in my body. So I did that, go into the pages, write it, check in with myself. And that sounds like a lot in 3 pages. How do you do like check in yourself? But, I don't know if it was necessarily 3 sentences how I wrote it initially, and then coming out of it and doing the same thing. Sounds very kind of, what does that have to do with writing?
I think it has everything to do with writing.
Right. Yeah.
So what it sounds like is that your therapist, whether they're somatic experiencing person or not, had you do some somatic exercises that allowed you to be in the room. And, one thing that can happen when someone has experienced sexual abuse, especially in childhood, is that we leave our bodies all the time. And
Yes.
so it makes sense to me that this may or may not be your experience, but it is a common experience that, if you've left your body in childhood, when you get back in these same types of experiences, whether you want them or not, you also leave. That's just a common thing. And so if you're leaving in the actual experience, it makes sense to me that a part of you would leave when you try to write that experience.
That's why it took so many years to come to that. I could not have written it any sooner, which brings me to like that whole compare and despair and getting the story
Yeah.
out and needing to have it on the shelf. Honor the journey, right? And I kept needing to come back to that. And that's exactly it. When I first started therapy and when I was in about, what the book is dedicated was sitting in the hours. I didn't know when my therapist would say, you're not in the room. I understood, but I didn't feel it. I said, I don't like it when you say that. Like, I just did not like it. And it took me a long time to come back in the room and then to start to notice when I was detached. So going back into the sex scenes and getting in my body was crucial. And you articulate it so well that it's like, oh, it has everything to do with writing. Because when I was working in the sex trade, I left my body.
Yeah.
So it's like, how can I write what I can't feel? So I started writing that. I was leaving my body, but it took the understanding as well of knowing that that's what I was doing so I could write from this place. One of the pushback I got with the book was, especially in the earlier chapters, there's not insight. It's like writing from a trauma perspective. That's the intention. I didn't want to fill it in with the insights.
And I actually appreciate that you didn't, because it allowed me to see the world through this child's eyes and experience that child's innocence and how that innocence was dashed through a very specific experience, but then again and again as different betrayals happened or confusing things happened. And so I'm really glad that you made that choice. We've talked about your writing process, the beginning of the process. If we think about how did you take something which I imagine had many thousands of words and then distill it down, how did you go about thinking about a specific chapter and weeding out the extra?
Once I started to kind of see it take shape, I always thought it was clipping along. I was so overwhelmed with when you're looking at pages that are just like a big mess, I was so overwhelmed. The overwhelming made me not want to sit down. I didn't believe I could do it. I knew I couldn't do it. I'm like, I can't do this. I'm not like a plot structure writer. I did envy, and I still envy like writers who can write an outline out, right? Which I did with one book just to see if I could do it. And I have to say, from my experience, it was easier. It was easier. But again, I saw them as clipping along, and I distilled it down because that's really what I found was easiest and what my memory kind of saw it as. And I also saw it as a way of capturing a little bit, moving along, moving along, moving along. Yeah, it was a really organic process. It wasn't intentional until as it came out. And I also really considered the reader. I know for myself, if I'm in a bookstore and I'll open it to the middle and see if I'm taken in. And I wanted, in a way, each story, not that they're all self-contained because there's 70, I think 75 chapters. That'd be a lot of self-contained, but I wanted each one to kind of stand on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And also because I had published some of them, I was writing for a magazine at the time. So it lended itself to that because in an essay,
Yes.
there's only so much room depending on the publication. Yeah. So I think in part because it made it more manageable for me.
Yeah. And I think that's true for a lot of writers. Like when you can whittle away some of that and get to the point, it can be so helpful. And some things that I do personally that help with
Yeah.
that process is sometimes I'll give myself a word count constraint. Like it has to be this number of words. And
Yes, I love that.
it doesn't have to be, but when
Yeah.
you have something that is a certain number of words, every word counts and it makes you think about what is my point. And I will actually beat out the chapter or whatever it is that I'm working on. What I mean by that is, what is the point here? How does that relate to the next point? And I can't do
Yes.
it on the first draft. Like you, I envy the people that can do that. This is like second, third, or maybe fifth draft kind of stuff
Yes.
sometimes.
Yeah.
But I will do that and I'll say, okay, what in this paragraph serves this point? And if it doesn't,
Yeah.
pull it out. And I'm
Right.
wondering how that compares to your process.
Very similar. I don't know if it's that conscious. When it's an essay, it's more conscious.
Mm-hmm.
As you did, I think you worked with Noah on your piece for the Huffington
Yes.
Post. That felt more like formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a way that was easier, like, does this inform this? Does this inform this? And I absolutely love what you're saying about the word count. I love microfiction. I'm reading like a short story collection right now. It's very short, like page stories. And I just love it. I love the ability to be able to capture a whole thing in that constraint, like the tiny love stories for the New York Times.
Yes. Which you have a beautiful one, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. And distilling that into 100 words, it's a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
What is it I'm really trying to say here?
And what I want writers to hear is that the shorter it is, at least I can say for myself, using those I statements, it takes a lot more drafts.
Yes. I mean, like for the LA Times, that one came out. I say this, but listen to the back point because I'll be like, oh, I wrote it in a night. I did. And it was the first draft, but it was also like all that months of writing. And then it came to that. But I couldn't have done it probably without those other months.
Isn't it amazing how all that happens? I mean, our
Yeah.
unconscious is so smart. Like sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. But that part of us, oh my gosh.
Yeah, and it's so important for me to be reminded of that. And that's why the conversations are so important with other writers. And we just don't know what's going to come from something because so much
Right.
of what I write, I'm like, well, what's the point of this?
Exactly. And it can be such a process. Well, you figured it out with this book, which came out in 2022. So 2 years have gone by and you're here on my podcast. You have been on
Yeah.
many other podcasts. Your book has been reviewed in many places. And a lot of people are curious about not just the process of, when you're writing a book and then you get your book published, that's its own journey. But then after your book ends, or at least we'll say it's reached its final destination, you can hold it in your hand, then it takes on its own life. And I'm curious to know about the post publication life of your book because it
Yeah.
seems to have this interesting momentum.
Right.
And as you're talking about this, what are the doors that have opened for you as a result of having published this book?
Oh my God, that's been a complete surprise. And one of the things that was shared with me when I was writing it is you don't know what your trajectory
Mm-hmm.
will be, right? And somehow I got open to the self promotion. I don't know when that happened because I was not open to it. People are like, oh, you're good at it. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not. I didn't have Instagram months before the book came out. I had zero Instagram. I was not even open to being on it. However, I would not have connected with you, right?
Right.
The biggest surprise is conversations like this is the community that has grown from it is really unexpected things. For example, in June, I was invited because of a C-SPAN book TV panel I had done. Anyway, it's a long story, but I ended up going to DC in June for World Without Exploitation, which is
Nice.
a huge conference of lawmakers and women who had been sex trafficked. And the fact that I got invited, I get chills now that I got invited to be on the main stage and speak with these two incredible women. Like one that does this foundation in India with, helping young girls get out of that life. And another one who founded an organization. I'm like, what am I doing on a stage with these two incredible women? Right. And so things like that, I think too, well, most surprising, most recently is the reading that I did at Barnes and Noble. And especially being, I want to tell the reader I'm a small press author. It's a one-man show. So that means all the promoting has been on my end, but I have not done it alone at all. It's all been word of mouth. I haven't pitched any, as an example, podcasts. It's come through community and engagement, and not necessarily with the intention of where that's going to lead, but truly engaging. And the surprises have been many. And again, the Barnes and Noble is a testament to that, because in order to get that, I had only done one other LA reading. I had gone on a book tour, but I kept LA to one because it's a lot of work. Yeah. and so with Barnes and Noble, I did pitch them. Bookstores I pitched, that's different than podcasts. And it took a while with Barnes and Noble, but I ended up having 100 people there. And that was shocking to me. And that's all because of community. It was not advertised. It wasn't like my name in Barnes and Noble didn't attract anyone. Well, I shouldn't say anyone, but I doubt it.
Yeah. And I think what you said is so important about community. And what I hope listeners hear is that it's not about that transactional style of community. I'm going to meet you, you're going to do this thing for me, but really saying, how can I know you? And then figuring out where is it that you can know people? And that's going to be different for each person.
That's right. And in reflecting on the book, I mean, I've been fortunate that there's a lot of themes in this book, because I think of my next book coming out and I don't see it having the journey of this book. I just don't see that. And I certainly didn't see it for this, though. So who knows? Yeah, we just don't know where it's going to take us.
We don't.
Oh, the other thing that I think is really important, and I don't always do this at all, but it's something that's really important for me to remind myself, is what's my intention? I do believe in a God, a universe. So it's like during the tour, I prayed, please show me where I can best be of service. And so in the book tour, it became more than about the book. It became about so many relationships that I can't even tell you that transpired, where I got to help two family members because I connected with them and I hadn't met them before. Because I was in those cities and I stayed with them, both of them lost their sons in that time, or one before, one after. And how does that happen, right? And that is because of the book, but it's tied into something bigger.
That is so beautiful. And what I love about it is that you brought a specific kind of energy. And that energy wasn't about, please buy my book and please boost my book sales. It wasn't that kind of energy, which of course every author is going to be thinking about that a little bit. It's not like you don't think about it. And yet you opened yourself up.
Yeah.
How can this book be of service to others? And you slipped in there that you're working on something else. And, that's another question that a lot of listeners have. Sure, you're working so hard, you're writing one book, but once you get that done, what's next? So I know that people can sometimes be a little cagey about sharing, topically what they're working on. Other people are like, let me tell you. So sharing your own range, but what are you working on now? And how is that informed by this experience that you've had with Strip?
That's a good question. I don't know how it's informed it, because it's a very, very different book. I'm going back to my first love of short stories. Short stories notoriously, everyone will say this, but they said about memoir, won't sell. I don't know, but it informs it in that, I think, what it does in the feeling that it gives, I have more faith. I didn't have faith that this would be on the shelves. It was a really challenging path with getting it published. And I just want to stress that to the listeners. And also, I'm someone that really does the work with the research. When a press would reach out, I would talk to the authors. I didn't jump into any yeses
Yeah.
as much as I wanted, like, oh, this is it. I had two different agents, and there's so many different ways to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what I'm working on next is a short story collection. I actually started it 24 years ago. If you had asked me when I'm 35, oh, it's done. I did it. No, 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 now it's back. you know, and a lot of them were published separately over the years, but it's a short story collection about love, jealousy, and affairs, and very different from Strip. This informs the journey as I have more faith in it. And I do feel more confident in terms of not necessarily the writing. Right. I come back to the page and I'm like, what is going on here? This is terrible, and all of that stuff. But more faith that it will find a home.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I often tell writers that your first draft, especially of a book, proves to you that you can write a book, right? It helps you have that vision of like, I can make it to this finish line because you have before. So you have that muscle memory. But I wonder because when I was doing research, one of the things you said
Yeah.
was Strip helped you find your voice. And I
Mhm.
wonder if you now find that because you found your voice, you're able to use it in new ways as you work in this short story collection, which is a different genre. It's beyond just knowing, like, oh, yeah, I published a book before. I know I can do it again, but I'm approaching this with a different sense of power.
I think so. I mean, it's interesting because a lot of the stories, like my voice is very similar to what it was in my 20s.
Mm,
There's more layers. As an example, some of the stories that were published that will be in the collection or are in the collection, I went back in, they did not hold up in my eyes. So it being published didn't mean for me that it was done. There needed to be more layers and more needed to be pushed further in terms of where the story could go and the language, but more about what is it I'm trying to say here. I think that's the depth that they have that's changed. Yeah.
well, I'm excited to read it because I am a big fan of your work. And, you've shared so much writing wisdom. I'm curious as we wrap up, when you think about writing a book is a marathon, and then supporting a book is a second marathon. You are in
Yes.
year two of that. How are you supporting your resilience as you continue to do this work?
Nature. Yesterday I went on a hike and I just, I thought, oh, like the whole time I'm working on a story in my head. And I'm like, just stop. And I made the hike much longer. And I stopped and I looked at the birds and it also it helps me settle. That's one of the most important things. And the resilience, I would not be able to do it without my writing group. When I say writing group, there's two of us, now we've been together for a long time, but yeah, well, two other women and myself, and having that like keep going, keep going.
Yes. Shout out to the writing groups.
Oh, yeah, because I don't know what I have. And then I read it out loud. And just before meeting with you, I was meeting with my writing partner.
I love how they normalize this experience for us. And it's just so healing and nurturing. Well, if people
Yeah.
want to buy a copy of Strip and they want to connect with you, what are the best ways for them to do that?
I think Instagram at Hannah Sward author. So my name, which is spelled like Hannah, and then Sward author. And in terms of buying it, bookshop.org, it's always wonderful to support the independent bookstores. If you're in LA, a lot of bookstores here have it. I don't know about other cities. And then, of course, Amazon. And I think for right now, and I'm going to probably have the publisher see if he can extend the Kindle to 99 cents. I like to have that option for people. Yeah. And also libraries, if you're trying to save money, you can order it from a library. People are like, yeah, don't you get more money if you buy it somewhere? I'm like, I get $1. I don't really care. It's like, it's not about the money.
No, it never is when it comes to publishing. But when you order at a library, what happens is that, you get to enjoy the book, and then someone who may or may not be able to afford it also gets the opportunity. So it's the gift that keeps on
Yeah.
giving. And yes, support your local bookstore. You never know what role they're going to play in your life. And I am so excited. And I hope that you're able to extend that 99 cent, promotion, because that would just make it a nice gift for people as well. Well, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast. It has been an absolute delight to talk with you today.
Lisa, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for having me. And to listeners, thank you for listening. And to you in your own writing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Hannah Sward. If you'd like to learn more about Hannah and, most importantly, buy a copy of her memoir strip, please see the show notes. But before you go, text the show if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or post a comment on YouTube with a tip or aha you had from this discussion that you're taking with you. If you love this episode, here are 3 simple ways that you can keep this show thriving. 1, subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. 2, leave a 5-star review so others can find the show. 3, join my engaged, dynamic community by signing up for the Writing Your Resilience newsletter. As a thank you, you'll receive a free copy of Ditch Your Inner Critic, 5 tools to transform self-doubt into self-support. Until next time, remember that your story matters. As you write and connect with the truest, most authentic version, you become not just the writer, but the person you're meant to be. And that, my friends, is the real freedom writing can offer.